for me anyway. I'm not as worried as you are, but again, I'm just a little worried about their trench play, which has been their DNA for the past few seasons, and just what it wasn't there. I mean, a team that had Aiden Hutchinson, you would have thought they would be generating more than 2 pressures. Again, statement victory, like with the Packers, statement victory, finally beating the Chiefs after 7 straight losses in that rivalry. And then Justin Herbert was just so good in a big game with a big audience, which is something that we've all been waiting for, but especially me, as I've been incredibly critical on Herbert in these big games. That's what I've wanted to see for so long. For years I've been wanting him to come up big in the fourth quarter, which is where he's traditionally struggled. It was great to see him have the confidence to convert that 3rd and long and just take it on himself and unice the game.
McCarthy seems to have that winner, that mentality. I'm not going to say Tom Brady, but the parallels are there. Michigan, both players play at quarterback, comes in and fancied, both have setbacks. Brady with a backup to Drew Bledsoe, McCarthy has the injury. But I think a lot of people were saying out of college, McCarthy's a winner. He won games in Michigan, and people were saying, oh, but he's led by a good offensive line, by a good defense. But from what
he's got that in Minnesota. That's what he's got.
Hello, everyone. Cecil Martin here.
Hey, this is Hunter Henry.
What's up, man? This is Max Crosby, part of Raider Nation.
Hey, this is Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman.
Hey, it's Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks.
Hey, this is Jared Judah, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, and you're listening to the 14-Yard NFL Podcast.
Well, week 1 is now in the books, and what a weekend of football it was, with some big statement performances, some late leads blown, and some very competitive endings. I'm Sam Moores, and this is the Full 10 Yards NFL podcast. And in today's episode, we'll react to all of those week 1 games. It was a week 1 for the ages, which saw the closest average margin of victory in the opening week of an NFL season since 1983. We'll do that, and then we'll make our picks for every week 2 game against the spread towards the end of the podcast as well. And join me to talk about some risers in week 1, some fallers in week 1, and who really caught our eye as teams last week is a good friend of mine. He's a fellow NFL UK media member. He's famous for his TikTok channel, Andy Talks NFL, and of course is the host of Across the Pod as well. Welcome back, Andy Davies, mate. Great to have you on again.
Thank you, mate. Good to be back on. Can't think when I was last on the show. It might have been during the playoffs. I remember talking about David Daniels and the Commanders.
I think it was the championship preview the last time you came on. So, yeah, not too long ago in terms of podcasts ago, because there's not been many weeks since then. But in terms of actual time, it's been quite a while. Yeah,
it has flown by. It feels like only last month we had that Daniels Commanders run to the championship game. It just feels mad that since it's been 7 months, and it just doesn't. It feels like maybe 2 months. It does not feel like for me 7 months. It is crazy how long it seems and then how fast it actually goes.
Yes, absolutely. What a absolutely terrific week 1 was, and this week as well. You got some great games this week. You got a Super Bowl rematch, and which one are you most excited about this week?
I kind of think, on paper, you think it's got to be probably the Eagles Chiefs because of the rematch and all the stories. But I feel like I've seen that game recently. So for me, I'm looking at tonight's game. I think Commanders Packers is a really good indicator on both teams. I think the Packers, obviously their defense was electric in that first week, and I think that was the biggest takeaway for me, was how good that defense was for the Packers against the Lions. And I think the Commanders, they're in that sort of mode of second-year quarterback. Could it be a quarterback sub? Could it be just them raising their game? And I think it's hard to really gauge how good they were when he beat the Giants. It's not really. I don't think it's a test of how good you are. I think if you lose the game, then it's a good test of how bad you are. But if you win that game against the Giants like they did, I don't think I'm taking away from that game and thinking anything's changed. I don't feel like week 1 is really much of a gauge for me. I think for many games, because week 1 is a bit of an anomaly, but I do think Commanders against the Giants, I think that this is the real test for them at Lambeau as well, which is one of the hardest places to go. particularly more late on in the season because of the weather. But even in week 2, I think this game for me, you've got Daniels, Jordan Love, you've got Micah Parsons, you've got so many storylines to come in this game, and I think this for me is what I'm really excited for tonight.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and it's the first one on Amazon Prime as well. So it certainly will be fun to watch. Before we get into the main segment of this podcast, we've also got our new DFS Stars segment to come to later on in the podcast. We'll share some daily fantasy tips for your lineups later on. That's brought to you, of course, by Fantasy Gameday, the UK's dedicated daily fantasy app. If you're a new user, you can get a free entry when you sign up with the code FULL10, and they'll give you a free game credit after you deposit and enter your lineup on the app. And just a quick reminder as well, please gamble responsibly and only if you're 18 or over and based in the UK and Northern Ireland. All right, we'll get on with the episode now, and we'll begin by each picking 3 teams that we think have seen their stocks either rise or fall after week performances. We're going to pick the teams individually. We're going to go one by one. It will be a snake draft, starting with me at pick 101, and then we'll start with our first riser there, the team that I'm probably most impressed by. And we have a little chat about it off air, and I think there's only one team to start with for me, and that's the team that won by the biggest margin of the week in 25 points. It was the only 3-score game of the week. It was an utter blowout for what was set as one of the actual closest spreads of the week going into week 1, and it ended up being not that close at all because the Colts had an absolute day for the ages on Sunday, so I'm taking the Colts. And I think a lot of that was down to how bad the Dolphins were, if I'm being honest. And we'll of course get to them in a second because they'll certainly be in the Fallers section of of this. But I couldn't not give the Colts their flowers because their offense scored in each of their 7 drives. They became the first team to do that in a game since 1977, which blew my mind when they read that stat out on after the broadcast and on Red Zone as well. And and that powered Shane Steichen's team to a first opening day win for the franchise since 2013. And it was their first game since the death of Jim Irsay as well. So it was a very emotional victory for the Colts. Daniel Jones had a perfect debut, completing 75% of his passes for 272 yards and scoring 3 total touchdowns, 1 passing, 2 rushing, with a passer rating of 115.9. And, he wasn't asked to do much, but when needed, he delivered. And he made some great plays with his legs too, and that offensive line in front of him was a big thing for me because it was the highest graded pass blocking unit of the entire week by PFF, and they were going up against the Dolphins defensive line that everyone's talked about as one of the best in the NFL, and they just completely that Dolphins front seven is really, really good. It's their back end that's terrible on defense, and they just dominated them. They controlled the clock with the run game. They averaged 10.6 yards. 10.6 plays per drive, which is just shows a really, really long drive that just gave the Dolphins no time to come back into this game after the turnovers at the start of the game. And their defense was mega as well. They confused Tua to throw 2 interceptions on one of the worst games in his career. It's rare that Tua has a bad game, but when he does have a bad game, the turnovers come at once, and it was one of these games. That was it. Lou Anarumo sent some creative blitzes in the offensive line, and Tua just couldn't identify them as well, and it was a disaster from the very start as well. I mean, what a performance this was from the Colts.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know whether were they good or were we bad, but I think the defense just gave Tua problems all day long. I mean, I will say there were times where the offensive line had bad moments. There was a play, I think, I can't remember whether it was interception or sack, where Devon A-Chain was sort of missed his assignment. It was meant to be blocking, and Tua got hit. But I think, fair play to the Colts, because they're a team that I criticised for a lot of the offseason. I thought that they would struggle in the quarterback room. I didn't think he had many elite weapons to throw to, but he's just slinging it to different guys. I thought Taylor only had, I think, 7 plays with more than 10 yards rushing, but he made it count when it mattered. And Daniel Jones got success in the red zone, particularly in the run game as well. So I think, for the Colts, I think it was a pretty much perfect performance. I think not just how they played, but also just for addressing the doubters like myself. A lot of people were down on the Colts. I think even though it's only week 1, even though it's against the Dolphins, I feel like this kind of performance that will get people talking about the Colts more. I don't think as a Super Bowl contender, but I think certainly as a team that's going to ruffle some feathers, is going to win more games maybe we thought, maybe be in that playoff conversation in weeks 15, week 16 and onwards. So, yeah, I think the Colts-wise, it was really impressive. But I think equally the Dolphins were just shambolic. I think the only real, I think, person that can go away from this game happy is A-Chain. I don't think anyone else from this team can really cover themselves in glory. I mean, I think the
Would you
D-line
pick the Dolphins as your first faller then?
They're actually my second faller. I feel like
okay.
there wasn't much expectation on the Dolphins compared to my first
Yeah.
thought when it came to fallers. But certainly they're one of the fallers for me because I thought they made the playoffs as like a surprise team, maybe as a 7th seed. I just felt like they were a team. If everyone stayed healthy, this team could cause problem. You think about the D line, especially Zach Sealer, Trot Robinson, Bradley Chubb back, Jaden Phillips is back. But I think as we saw, it was secondary that is going to be the problem all year long. That's what everyone was saying in the offseason. That's going to be the biggest issue. And I think in this game, I think it really showed against one of the worst teams we got on paper. God knows how we're going to play against the Bills and the Ravens, the Bengals, and as we saw week 1 against the Jets. Or it's the schedule now looks even harder than it already did based on that first week.
Who have you got as your biggest faller of the week then?
Detroit Lions.
Ooh,
I
okay.
do think on the one hand, I think they were just outplayed on the day, and I'm still they were my pick to win the NFC. I still have faith in them, but I think from a performance point of view, it was way below what I was expecting to have. I think there's probably been worse performers of the week, like the Dolphins, for example. But I think the Lions, for all the expectation, only losing 2 games in the regular season all of last year to only lose 1 in week 1, I think for me was a big worrying sign. Of course, no new changes in coordinators, and I think they're against Bears next. I think that's going to be a lot tighter than people think, and I think that if they go 0-2, I think that's going to set some real alarm bells around this franchise. So I think against a division rival, lose already in week 1, you lose, go 0-1 in the division, and they're halfway towards losing that tiebreak if it got to that point with the Packers. And yeah, I just think for them, a team that's got aspirations to make the Super Bowl, to win the NFC, certainly to win the division, I think this was completely not the perfect way to start the season for the Lions.
Yeah, it's hard not to overreact, so I'm trying not to, because obviously it is week 1. I think it was more like the Packers were really good, obviously, than the Lions were bad. But I think I agree with you. I think the way they were out physicaled is concerning to me, because that's what we've come to expect from a Dan Campbell team. It's a physical, run game. We didn't see that, and you could really tell that they lost their 2 interior offensive linemen this offseason, because this offensive line did just not look as it did a year ago. It really didn't. The run game was terrible in this game, and and Jared Goff was also sacked 4 times. The offensive line just wasn't good, and Jahmyr Gibbs had 2.1 yards per carry. David Montgomery had 2.3 yards per carry. And that put it all in Jared Goff's hands, and he was terrible. He and that's where he's vulnerable, where it all breaks down, and it did all break down. I don't think it's time to panic yet. There were still like multiple big games and nice things with this offense that were well schemed, and not too different from obviously when Ben Johnson was calling plays rather than John Morton as it is now. But it is a little bit of concern. I think Lambeau Field's a hard place to play, of course, and replicate that their offense as well. It's like Lambeau Field and Ford Field are 2 completely different places. They're like 2 complete different scales, levels on the scale in terms of places. So we'll see what happens when they have a couple of home games on their belt. But I don't think the defense is that bad. But I do agree with you. Like a lot of it looked the same for the Lions, but just for me anyway, I'm not as worried as you are. But again, I'm just a little worried about their trench play, which has been their DNA for the past few seasons, and it just what it wasn't there. I mean, a team that had Aiden Hutchinson, you would have thought they would be generating more than 2 pressures in a game, which they did. So that is a concern. All right, I'll go back to you, Andy, with your first riser of the week.
I'm going to go for the team that the Lions played. I'm going for the Packers. I just feel like, again, I said before, in a big NFC North game, I think this for me sent out a huge statement. I think just to the NFC in general, not just the NFC North, because I don't think there's, you think about the AFC, you'd be surprised if it's not one of the Bills, Ravens, Bengals, or Chiefs, playing the Super Bowl. I think that those four, I think are miles clear of everyone else in that conference. But I think in the NFC, the Eagles have lost coordinators. There's the Madden curse element. The Lions have lost coordinators now. The Rams have that Matt Stafford concern, and after they didn't go that far in the playoffs last season. So I think in terms of the NFC in general, I think it's definitely open for a team to try and grab it and win it this year. And I think the Packers, before the Parsons trade, I think they were lacking that X factor, especially with J.R. Alexander sort of past his best and be moved on. And I think Michael Parsons, as we saw on Sunday, just completely galvanises this team. You think about the comments being made already with Reggie White, his move to the Packers, and a historical trade in NFL history as well. And I feel like this, for me, is gonna, I think, could be seen if Packers are to go far this season. I think this will be seen as that sort of that shift, a bit like when Eagles got Barkley last season, a bit like going off topic, but Liverpool getting Alisson and Van Dijk. These one little couple of transfers or trades here and there can completely change the team's fortunes around, either good or bad. And I think you get Parsons in, add to already fairly stacked defense. I think this Packers team, for me, played that well against a team that were the one seed in the NFC last year, only lost 2 games in the entire of the regular season. I think it was such a good performance, and I think this Packers team, for me, is legit, and I think they're going to be a team that's going to be there and thereabouts. I think come divisional round, come NFC Championship. Now, of course, it's only week 1. I don't want to get ahead of myself. We don't want to overreact, as we were saying earlier. But at the same time, I just feel like there was a lot to be positive about when it comes to this Packers team, and I think as well, not even just the defense they had, but I think the amount of time Jordan Love had to throw the ball to his receivers, or it goes into what you were saying about only 2 pressures from this Lions defense, and yeah, it was just all round a really, really impressive performance from Green Bay.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I heard someone describe this as a statement win, and this really was a statement win because go back to last year, the Packers were 1-5 in division. They were a blocked field goal away from going 0-6 in their division. They got absolutely beat up in the AFC North last year, and to go and do this in your first NFC North game against the Lions, who were the best team in the NFC in the regular season last year, a huge statement win for the Packers. And I completely agree with pretty much everything you said there. I think this was a brilliant game. I think Jordan Love was great. I really did. The best thing was as well that he looked healthy, because last year he wasn't great, but then he was banged up the entire year last year. This year, he's coming into it. He's had a thumb injury, but you wouldn't tell. He's looked pretty. He's looked pretty good the whole year, and which he didn't like. Well, the whole game, which he didn't look at all last year, throwing the football, and they're pushing the ball downfield with purpose as well. He had this furthest average depth of target since week 12 of last year, which is when it all started going wrong down the stretch last year. And defense was so good; it carried on the top play from last year. Like, how many teams can shut down the Lions' run game? It was a joint league low, just 46 yards for the Lions on the ground, and it's their worst rushing performance since 2023. So, it's just seeing what Michael Parsons could do. He hurried Jared Goff in the second quarter for that interception. That Jared Goff interception is because of the pressure that Michael Parsons puts on, and he only played 30 snaps. Think about how good he could be when he plays every down. When he starts a game and he plays 50 60 snaps in a game, maybe depending on how the game goes, and you just it is just crazy. Once he's fully integrated into this defense, he's going to be very scary. And I think the Packers are certainly one of the teams to beat in the NFC. All right, go on to my first pick for my second pick for a riser. No, Faller. Is it Faller for me? Yeah, it's Faller. Okay, right. My first Faller is gonna be the Chiefs. I'm going for the Chiefs. Yeah, obviously they lost to the Chargers on Friday night, the first ever game exclusively streamed on YouTube, and I had a feeling the Chargers would win. So this isn't necessarily because the Chiefs lost. It's more the way that their defense looked. That's what really concerned me, because I said on the podcast loads of times, I so admire Steve Spagnuolo and what he's done with the revolving door of defensive backs that the Chiefs had. Think about how many DBs they've had starting in the last couple of years. So many, and they've managed to play to such a high level on defense every year. So when the Chiefs played like they did on the back end on Friday night, where they were just letting Quentin Johnston and Keenan Allen bully them, you do start to get a little bit worried there. I am a bit disappointed by what I saw in this defense. A lot of it might be because their pass rush struggled. Justin Herbert had 2.94 seconds to throw on average, which is the longest average time to throw for him since week 13 last year. So, and that's without Rashawn Slater as well. Think about what this game could have been if the Chargers had Rashawn Slater. Herbert would have had all day back there with how bad the Chiefs pass rush was. And, and then on the back end, only the Vikings had a worse team coverage grade than the Chiefs, which for a team and for a coordinator who's been so good in coverage, and Steve Spagnuolo, that's a worry. They really struggled to cover routes breaking into the middle of the field, especially. That's something that Kansas City struggled with, and then that receiver position for them is such a big concern. It's obviously a much bigger concern than I thought it would be, especially now that Xavier Worthy's potentially missing time with a shoulder injury after he collided with Travis Kelce. I can't say I'm not a little bit worried, but I do think they'll sort it out. Just now, from what we saw it's probably the worst performance we've seen from the Chiefs outside the Super Bowl in a long time, and that defense is one of the worst defensive performances I've seen Spags have in a long time. How worried are you about the Chiefs?
Not particularly. I think as a performance itself, standalone, I think it's really concerning. It was a really concerning performance. Apart from the one play, Kelce was pretty much irrelevant in this game. Maybe he was going through his father time era. Sorry, apologies for that joke I made. I thought the Chiefs were really bad, but I think we've seen the Patriots in years gone by have these poor starts. I think they had one, against the Chiefs years ago in the top eight, and they still ended up either making the Super Bowl or winning it. And I think, I said before, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And I think the Chiefs, for me, until they lose a game against the likes of the Bills and the Ravens, I still think they're going to be the team to beat in the AFC. I think that, for me, it was not good all round, but I think this maybe is a performance they need to give them a kick up the backside. Maybe go on and do well. They made 7 straight AFC Championship games, so I'm not concerned about it yet. I think if they were, they're playing the Eagles next. I think you go 0-2. I think then the alarm bell starts to ring. You got the Giants week 3. Okay, there's a chance to go 1-2, but the Chiefs are going to be. If they go 0-2, it's going to be a lot of pressure on that third game. And this Giants team, their defense alone, that defensive quartet of Burns, Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, and Brian Burns, so Abdul Carter, I think could, on their day, Chiefs have performances now and again. So there's a potential for them to get 0-3. I'm actually midway through writing an article where I've talked about how the Lions, Ravens, and Chiefs could all go 0-3 this weekend. Could all go 0-2 this weekend, which would be absolutely insane considering there's 3 of the favourites going into the year. So for me, not too concerned. I think 1 week on its own in a neutral venue, in the first week back, where not a lot of players play much pre-season these days. For me right now, no. If they play like it again against Eagles, and particularly if they struggled against the Giants in week 3, I think that would be then time to panic. But I think right now, 1 loss, I think it's absolutely fine. But no, certainly, if they were to get embarrassed by the Eagles, I think that could be another reason to be concerned.
You're listening to the Full 10 Yards NFL podcast, and we're really excited to announce that we'll be teaming up with Fantasy Gameday for the podcast this season, which is the very first NFL daily fantasy app made exclusively for us Brits and created by UK fans. To celebrate the partnership, they've given us a special offer to share with you, our audience, where if you sign up with a promo code FULL10, that's FULL10, you'll get a free game credit added to your account when you enter your first lineup. Every week there are dozens of competitions to get involved in, with entry fees starting from just £3, and there are big prizes to be won. If you're like me, you love playing fantasy football and love having someone to root for in Red Zone when your team aren't playing on a Sunday, this app is perfect for you. That's Fantasy Gameday, the only daily fantasy app built for UK NFL fans. And just a quick reminder, please gamble responsibly, and only if you're 18 and over and based in the UK and Northern Ireland. Right, I'll go on to my my riser. Now going back round, and we're talking about the Chiefs, so I'm going to say the Chargers were my next big riser. I think again, statement victory, like with the Packers, statement victory, finally beating the Chiefs after 7 straight losses in that rivalry. And then Justin Herbert was just so good in a big game with a big audience, which is something that we've all been waiting for, but especially me, as I've been incredibly critical on Herbert in these big games. That's what I've wanted to see for so long. For years I've been wanting him to come up big in the fourth quarter, which is where he's traditionally struggled. It was great to see him have the confidence to convert that 3rd and long and just take it on himself and unice the game with his legs. How often do we see that? In the fourth quarter for Justin Herbert, it was brilliant. And even in the last podcast, we spoke about the records that these teams have had in one-score games recently. The Chiefs have won the last 17 one-score games going into this game. The Chargers 6-13 of Justin Herbert at quarterback the last 3 years in one-score games. There's two teams that have been completely different in these kind of games, and the Chargers are just they basically got over the hump that they've been wanting to get to for so long. I thought it'd be better this year at it anyway because we would now they've improved the run game. You feel like they could close out games easier because again that's what they struggled with last year. I don't know if you've ever heard this stat, but I said it in the last couple of podcasts. The Chargers, if all games were decided in the first 3 quarters of games last year, the Chargers would have had the 2nd best record in the entire league last year. That's how bad they were in the fourth quarter last year, right? So to see them get over the hump and do this in week 1 was brilliant for them. And the run game wasn't even that good. It was actually the one area that the Chiefs excelled in defense was slowing down on Marion Hampton and a little bit of Najee Harris as well, so that they were relying on Herbert's arm, and he got them there. And for one of his best games in his career, especially considering the importance of the game as well. And this time last year, I think the Chargers may lose this game, but. Because numerically they were great, but they just always failed in the fourth quarter. To get this over that hump that early is massive, and seeing Quentin Johnson have a really good game after he sort of came on a bit towards the end of last year, seeing Keenan Allen after a terrible year last year have a great game, seeing Joe Alt play really well at left tackle. After obviously Rashawn Slater went down for the season, coming over from right tackle, he looked immense at left tackle. In fact, I think it was one of the highest graded offensive linemen of the week for PFF. And I think it was a real big statement by the Chargers, who I had missing the playoffs, and I hope I am wrong because I think they were really, really good on Friday night. All right, on to you, Andy. Who didn't impress you?
I have to say, there's been a lot of teams let me down this week, but I think one team I looked at particularly, a team that could be a team that could improve this year, the Carolina Panthers. Their loss against the Jaguars, 26-10. It was really bad. I mean, Bryce Young looked like the Bryce Young 3 getting benched in that game. Yeah. I think the Jags did impress me. The Jags, I think, could be teams to look out for this year, but I think equally Panthers were god awful. I mean, looking at in terms of Bryce Young's stats, 154 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, almost as many completions as incompletions as well in the passing game. Chuba Hubbard really failed to get involved. McMillan had a fairly okay-ish debut, but I think all round, to be honest, if you take away the one quarter, it was 3-3 in the first quarter, only 1 point difference in the fourth quarter, no points scored in the third quarter. So that second quarter alone, 17 points to 0 in favour of the Jags. I think that ultimately played a part. Obviously, the weather probably didn't help with that a little bit. The weather delay probably disrupted some rhythms. But yeah, for me, the Panthers, I think the team that was seen by many people as maybe a team that could push for that second place in the division, try and sneak into the playoffs of the wildcard team. I think this completely shut down any of that talk for me. So yeah, not a good week at all. And I think, in a way, Bryce Young feels like he needs time to sort of get into a rhythm. I think maybe it might take him a few weeks to get back into the groove again. But for me, I think certainly for Panthers fans who I think they have notoriously struggled in recent years in week 1, I think for me that was a really, really bad performance.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what it said to me more than anything is that the Panthers have just had a terrible offseason in surrounding Young after he had such a good end to last year. Like that's what it says to me because you've in fairness, Tedder McMillan, you gave him, and he looked good. He was exactly what he was drafted to be. A big body target between the numbers, catching these balls and sort of moving the chains, and that's what he did. He had a great game, but beyond him on offense, they weren't great, and I'm not surprised because they traded away the receiver that Bryce Young had the most chemistry with in Adam Thielen from last year. That connection was what got them what made Bryce Young a top 10 quarterback in terms of numbers in the second half of last year. It was that connection with Adam Thielen. And then Jalen Coker, the other receiver he had chemistry with, he's on IR now. And so beyond McMillan, he's throwing to Hunter Renfrow, who the team just re-signed. I just feel like they've done a terrible job for surrounding a quarterback on a rookie contract who's shown promise. I just think and then their defense sucks, and that's another the big reason for this game is it's not Young that lost the game, it's the Panthers defense. They're statistically the worst run defense in NFL history last year. They also allowed the most points in NFL history as well. They were terrible at this defense last year, and they allowed 200 yards on the ground when their star defense tackle Derek Brown comes back from injury. This defense was just terrible, and not impressed by the Panthers whatsoever. So I completely agree with you. On the other hand, who did impress you?
I'm going for the team that actually lost in week one. I'm going for the Dallas Cowboys. I felt for me, they were a CD Lamb drop away from take away one of those drops from CD Lamb, they might have won that game. And now they were boosted by Jalen Carter being ejected after 6 seconds. I think if he was there, it might have been a different story. But what I saw in week one from the run game, from Dak Prescott in particular, the defense, Nealand and Kenny Clark were really impressive for me in sort of causing problems. Now, the one thing I think wasn't great for me was their run defense. It did allow Dak Prescott or Jalen Hurts to have 2 rushing touchdowns. He had a field day when it comes to that part of the game. Was allowed just to roam free and sort of scramble around the pocket and make some plays. But I thought, apart from that, again, for a team that a lot of people were writing off, and myself included, get rid of Micah Parsons. Even with him, I thought they might struggle. Everyone was writing off the Cowboys against the reigning champions in their home ground when they're raising the banner. And one of the hardest places to go is Lincoln Financial Field. So for them to be only 4 points off winning this game, again, CeeDee Lamb just catches one of those 3 or 4 drops. I think they could have won this game. I thought all round, I thought the Cowboys, for me, I don't think I'm not sitting here thinking they're going to make an NFC Championship game or even make the wild card round. But I think certainly for a team that people were saying 6-7 wins, I think certainly now I'm looking at maybe the 9-8 record, or 8-9, or at most 10-7. I think this team, for me, Dak Prescott's back pretty healthy. You get Lamb playing how he did for most of that game. I think this team, if you've got CeeDee Lamb and you've got George Pickens, Dak Prescott, you aren't going to be winning less than 7 games. So for me, Cowboys for me were really impressive.
Yeah, I agree. And Dak looked so good as well. He was PFF's second highest graded quarterback of the week. It was his best grade since week 12 of the 2023 season. And obviously that was the best season of his career. And up until they got blown out by the Bills that season, I thought he was going to be MVP. Obviously, Lamar Jackson ended up getting MVP, but he was so good that season. And then last year, he was terrible. He was terrible before he got injured last year. He reverted back to the player that led the league in interceptions in 2022. Played some bad football, obviously a bad team, and Mike McCarthy ended up getting fired and everything. But he in terms of trying, he made some stupid decisions last year. To start off after a bad season for Dak like that, in front of everyone, when all everyone's talking about is how your team sucks because Michael Parsons is not there anymore and not talking about you. I think it was a great performance by him, and it was also nice to see Dallas run the football as well. Like Javonte Williams had a really good game, and last year they really, really struggled with a run game. So their offense looks really, really good. Bit concerned about their defense, but their offense looks really, really good, and that's great news for Dallas. All right, I'll go with a faller now. I'm going to go for the Patriots. I yeah, a lot of people have them as a playoff team, and I was a bit disappointed, if I'm being honest, from what I've seen. I thought Drake May was okay. I think he was decent. I've seen him have better games, I've seen him have worse games. I think he's getting a bit of flack for this game, and really, you cannot blame Drake May for how the Patriots played against the Raiders on Sunday. That's not really deserved. This offense just isn't very talented. It really isn't. And without Christian Gonzalez, they really struggled in their pass defense as well. Geno Smith was absolutely slicing and dicing the Patriots secondary, and what annoyed me is they abandoned the run game literally midway through this game when it wasn't doing that bad. Like it was, they were struggling, but they had the lead at half time. They had the ball back after half time to make it a 2-score lead, and they decided not to try and manage the clock and run to start the drive. No, we're going to call 6 straight passing plays. It's like and then the drive ended in an interception, and then the Raiders got back into it and went on to win the game. And I just think Josh McDaniels is not a good offensive play caller. I really don't. I feel like this team is stuck in too much in the old Patriots era. I just feel like this offense looks to me pretty much no different to the offense that Mac Jones was running with Josh McDaniels, and then a couple of years ago before he went and took the job to coach the Raiders as a head coach. And I mean, certainly for a revenge game for him as well, he called a terrible game as a revenge game. They had one nice play where they sort of had almost like they basically had 3 players behind, 2 running backs and a quarterback behind the line of scrimmage on a 3rd and 1, and they rolled out to the left and converted that 3rd and 1. But other than that, just boring offense. And again, just the play call in there, I think they run twice in the entire second half. It was so predictable. Like Drake May had to drop out 53 times, his career high. I just feel like they basically, and the offensive line wasn't great either. They basically just set him up to fail. I'm really not impressed by what I saw from Patriots in week 1. And I thought it'd be good. I really like Mike Vrabel. I think he's a great coach, but some penalties in there are just sloppy. I think is the way I describe this game for the Patriots. Just the Raiders, the Raiders out. They basically beat them fair and square. I think in the end, I think the defense will get better when Gonzalez comes back, and they'll get more pressure on quarterbacks than they did on Sunday. I thought the Raiders offensive line did an all right job. Well, Colton Miller did an all right job. He's a great left tackle, but I just feel like New England are the most pressures this week. The run game was a struggle, and I know there's a ceiling with Josh McDaniels' offense. I'm just, I can't see them. They're a couple playmakers away and probably 3 offensive linemen away from being a top offense. And I feel sorry for Drake May because again, this was meant to be his breakout year, but really nothing's really changed with the offense, if I'm being honest. Do you agree with me there, or are you?
Yeah, no, I'm inclined to agree. I mean, I feel very scared of saying this with us playing in about 3 days' time. But yeah, I was not impressed at all. I think again it's gonna be a similar thing to us. I think it's the secondary. The secondary was really bad, and I think I'm intrigued to know what happens on Sunday because I think both our teams, that's probably both teams' weakest areas. And
shootout, I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
Oh God, I mean, go back to in a shootout? Probably not. I mean, the one against Tyler Murray in his rookie year and against Lamar Jackson.
Well, the one, last year he would have won 2 if Raheem Moss didn't fumble. The Cardinals game, the Bills game, he was great in the 4th quarter in both of those games last year. Then Raheem Moss that fumbles cost the team, and obviously the Bills kicked a 60-yard field goal in that game as well. So I think if the Dolphins win those 2 games again, I don't think you'd be worrying about that. But yeah, I completely agree with you. I don't really know who wins that game if it is a shootout because I haven't really seen much of it from both quarterbacks, to be honest with you. And I'll go for my final riser here. I'm going to go for the Vikings. No. I'll go for the Jets. Changing my mind. I'll go for the Jets. Because, again, another team that lost instead of the Cowboys. So impressed with them in their loss. So impressed. Like Justin Fields, one of the best games of his career, especially as a passer. I thought he was immense as a passer. He had PFF's 2nd highest passing grade behind Matt Stafford. which is the best score he's ever been given as a passer in his career since coming into the league in 2021. And the chemistry of Garrett Wilson as well. Obviously, you can tell they went to the same college. Brees Hall looked good too, averaging 4.74 yards after contact, which is really good for Brees Hall. It was the third best of running backs with at least 10 carries there, and with how good the offensive line looked as well, like, I'm really excited about this Jets offense. I think Tanga Enstrom, the offense coordinator, who they stole from the Lions, who was the assistant to Ben Johnson, they look really good on offense, and then the offensive line, like 10 pressures, just the 1 sack. I think, what a debut for Armand Membu at right tackle. Great in the run game. Didn't allow a single pressure in the pass game on your debut going against that Steelers pass rush of Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt. Like, what a performance from him. And what a performance from the defense as well, getting to Aaron Rodgers 4 times, despite Arthur Smith's game plan basically been trying to get it out of Aaron Rodgers' hands as quick as possible. He had a really, really quick time to throw. They were throwing screens to DK Metcalf. It was a very much try and short passing game, and the Jets defended that brilliantly, I thought. In the end, again, they lost to a better team in the end, but in terms of the culture that Aaron Glenn set out, you can see that already. Their offense is going to be really fun to watch as well. Again, scoring 32 points against a really good Steelers defense was brilliant for that offense. And I might be crazy saying this, but I think this could, at the end of the day, be the second best team in the AFC East right now, because they had a really, really good game. They're strong in both trenches, which again has been really key for them as going throughout the season. If Justin Fields plays even okay with that offense along with that run game with Garrett Wilson, I think the Jets could really surprise this season. All right, Andy, who are your who's your final fooler?
Chicago Bears for me. I think you think about how that game went, and prime time Monday Night Football in Chicago. A lot of hope, as they have every year in the fan base in Chicago. All the hope going into it, and you go into half time and you 17-3 at half time or something like that. It was such a one-sided first half. Caleb Williams was getting so much protection from his O-line, had so much time in the pocket to throw the ball to. 10 straight completions. I believe the first quarterback. Can't think whether this ever in a long time they've had 10 straight completions in their first game of the season. Williams looked amazing in the first half. There's that rushing touchdown he made. I believe it was their first touchdown of the game. And then
his first ever rushing touchdown as well. Didn't have a single one last year.
Oh wow! Okay, well that's something I didn't know.
And he had 2 1 game. No, he didn't. He was short. He had one, and then he was short the second one.
Right. Yeah,
but that was his first ever rushing touchdown. So
yeah, it was a first half performance. It was just so un-Bears at times. It felt like, okay, here they are. Maybe they're going to challenge the NFC North. They're looking legit. They're looking good. And then second half came. Brian Flores figured it out. First half was quite conservative from him as a DC, but second half the blitz came out, and they had no way to stop that. And they went from being, I think, 17-3 up, being 24-17 down, or something like that. It was such a poor second half, and particularly the fourth quarter. I mean, 3 touchdowns from JJ McCarthy in that quarter. They just completely allow that game to pass them by, and 9 times out of 10 they probably win that game. It just feels like it was all the hope going into the off season from the Bears fans. Week 1 comes and they have just a classic Bears performance. So for me, the Bears probably not feeling too great about week 1.
And if you were to pick a final team that impressed you for this week, what would that team be?
See, I wanted to go Bills, but then we know the Bills are good, so I kind of feel like it was an amazing comeback, and Josh Allen got it done in a big game, albeit in the regular season. But I'm going to go for, again, the team that my fours played. I'm going for the Vikings. I think from what I saw, the quarterback who's essentially a rookie, go out and show something that I certainly said he'd have, and I think a lot of people were saying out of college, McCarthy's a winner. He won games in Michigan, and people were saying, oh, but he was led by a good offensive line, by a good defense. But from what I
he's
saw,
got that in Minnesota. That's what he's got.
Yeah.
And he was missing his left tackle. When they get Darisaw back, it's like...
That's exactly why I was saying off-season. I said it in an article. You got one of the best quarterback coaches to work with in O'Connell, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Allison, TJ Hawkinson, Aaron Jones. O-line isn't too bad. Defense can win you games alone. McCarthy seems to have that winner, that mentality. I'm not going to say Tom Brady, but the parallels are there. Michigan, both players play at quarterback, comes in and fancied. Both have setbacks. Brady was a backup for Drew Bledsoe. McCarthy has the injury. I feel like again, week one, I don't want to give him. I feel bad calling him Tom Brady after 1 week of playing a game, but what I saw in that performance when the chips are down, not playing at your best. We've seen this in many sports. Footballers, they can go 89 minutes without scoring a goal. And then I remember Torres was amazing for that back in the day. Go quiet out of nowhere, he'd get 1 or 2 goals. Same as Salah at times. And I feel like with McCarthy and a lot of quarterbacks, if you can down and not let it get to your head, I think some quarterbacks are certainly guilty of that. Kyler Murray to time Dak Prescott. But I think if I'm a Vikings fan seeing in that week one performance a quarterback who could have easily thrown that pick six, head could have gone down, he could have completely folded, could have been a point when O'Connell took him out of the game to protect him. What does he do? Comes back, throws a touchdown, threads a needle for Justin Jefferson, amazing throw to Aaron Jones, and then the rushing touchdown to seal the game at the end. It was unbelievable. It was just a performance I felt like from the Vikings all around. Second half in particular was, for me, was really impressive, and I think the Taiwan Lions lost and the Packers won. You want to try and keep up pace with the teams, and I think to start the season 0-1, sorry 1-0 against a division rival, I think it's absolutely perfect. I think the defense let me down in that first half, but I was really impressed with how Flores changed it up second half and got to Caleb Williams. And they're probably going to play harder teams this year. They're probably going to play bigger opponents, but from what I saw, the Vikings team was really impressive in just that fourth quarter alone.
Yeah, I agree, and I think this is the best coach team in the NFL. I really do.
Ooh.
You look at Kevin O'Connell, what he's done, quarterback after quarterback. He made Josh Dobbs look really good. Brian Flores makes every player better on defense. They're so good on the grass, getting improvements out of players. That I feel like, again, like Steve Spagnuolo, I feel like they can work with anyone and just if they've got some sort of trait and then just use that trait to the best ability. And I think, yeah, I do think this is the best coach team in the NFL. We just look at the adjustments, right? McCarthy, terrible in the first half, terrible. The worst EPA of the league in terms against the blitz, 30th under pressure. I went to sleep halfway through this game. The last thing I remember is watching him for that pick six to Narshawn Wright. Next thing I woke up and he scored 3 touchdowns, scored 21 unanswered points because of the adjustments that Kevin O'Connell made. And then on defense, Brian Flores made great adjustments, very much shutting down the Bears' offense, which was running all over them. And the DBs are terrible in the first half. Second half, the Bears just couldn't get anything going. They just the way they adjusted after the momentum on that changed. Just brilliant from the Vikings, and I'm so high on them. And I was really impressed by what we saw at the end for McCarthy, and hopefully we can see that in the big moments more, because Minnesota always going to be there or thereabouts in every game because of how good the roster is. All they need for him is to be decent. So I completely agree with you there. And then we'll finish with my faller, my final faller, the Giants. I expected them to struggle this season, don't get me wrong. I really did. But it was just disappointed by how far off they looked against a defense that really isn't that good in the Commanders' defense. Like, there are much better defenses in the NFL, and you scored the fewest points in the entire league this week. I thought it was going to be close because I thought the Giants' pass rush could cause absolute havoc against this Commanders' offensive line, which again isn't that great. Jen Downs just gets the ball out quickly on moves to make them look okay. But they can only just this defensive line with Brian Burns, Kevin Thibodeau, Abdul Carter, Dexter Lawrence, and more. They can only generate 4 pressures the entire game against that Commanders' offensive line. It's just I was a joint 5th worst in the league this week, and we did not expect that from this defensive line against that offensive line. It's the heart of their defense, and it couldn't rush a passer. It also couldn't stop the run. They allowed 220 rushing yards in this game, the second most behind the Bills. And don't even get me started on this Giants offense. Yes, they are missing Andrew Thomas. I get it. He's their best offensive lineman. The offense is completely different when he's not there. But again, Washington doesn't exactly have the best defense. and Russell Wilson was inaccurate as hell. 45 complete of his percent of his passes were completed, which is bad news when you look at where those passes are going, which is a lot of them short. His average depth of target was just 6.7 yards. So if you're not completing those passes, then that's a real bad sign there. And only JJ McCarthy was worse than Russell Wilson this week on 3rd and 4th down. And that's Russell Wilson, who has won Super Bowls, played in big moments. Terrible on 3rd and 4th down, according to Sumo Sports. And I thought the back end of the Washington defense was there to be got. I really did. They were 30th in defensive EPA last year, but his pass game just had no juice. And I really do wonder how long it will be until we do see Jackson Dart start full time. Because the only thing that's stopping him is probably the fact that his schedule is brutal. But other than that, this offense had absolutely nothing, in my opinion, this week.
Yeah, the only thing they had positive was that Cam Scadapo.
Cam Scadapo, yeah.
He
From
won,
running back from Arizona State, yeah.
He won angry runs on Good Morning Football, so there was at least one positive out of that offense. But I think they talked about Brian Daboll saying they're going to redshirt into the year, and I think there'll be more pressure. And I kind of feel like if you start the season 0-6, 1-7, 2-5. Maybe not 2-5 as much, but certainly if you start the season just one win in your first 7, there's that pressure to start it. But I think at that point you're not making the playoffs.
But if they start the season that badly, the only thing that can save him and Joe Jones' job is if you play Jackson Dart and he plays well. That's the only thing. It's like if they start the season so badly and he's still in a job, you have to go the Dart because he's the only person that can save your job. Otherwise, you're gone.
Just saying that for his career, it's just the worst thing you can do.
I know.
In that
but
bad.
You've got to think about his own job. If Brian Daboll doesn't play Jackson Dart at some point, he's gone.
No, true. But I always think about if Boa hadn't got injured in that rookie season, they wouldn't have got Jamar Chase probably. So I feel like it's that fine line because Daboll, exactly what you said, he wants to keep his job. He wants to try and. But I think we may be more likely to see James Winston than Jackson Dart. I think that they may go for him first because. I think as a franchise, you have to sort of think about all the best players in NFL history or current players now. You think about Tom Brady didn't start his rookie year. Peyton Manning did start, but Brett Favre didn't start his rookie year. Even current players, Lamar Jackson was behind Joe Flacco, Mahomes behind Alex Smith, Jordan Love behind Aaron Rodgers, and Rodgers behind Favre. Most of the best quarterbacks in NFL history don't start their rookie years. I think only really Peyton Manning. I'm too young to know what Johnny Unitas did in his rookie year.
Josh Allen did, but Lamar didn't. So and Josh Allen looked terrible for the first couple of years. So it's one of those where you got evidence both sides. At the end of the day, it's probably best to get snaps, but again, it all depends on the situation, and again, it depends on individuals. And Brian Daboll is an individual that needs to keep his job. So if he's not we'll see what happens. Say he gets fired early on, maybe it's different. But then, I don't know. I think we'll see Dart sooner rather than later. I think the way they played in that game, and they've got much tougher games coming up. So I like Washington, but I feel like the Giants matched up well against Washington. They don't match up well against many other teams, if we're being honest. So that is a concern. Okay, we'll move on to the daily fantasy segment of the episode now, which is brought to you by our partners of the podcast, Fantasy Gameday, the UK's only dedicated daily fantasy app. Last week we had a mixed week with our picks. The 5 players identified as either a bargain or a lineup lock were Jamar Chase, Daniel Jones, Kenneth Walker, Jalen Waddle, and Tyler Warren. And Jones and Warren were home run picks, and that was a great stack from me. I thought. The Colts scored in every single one of their 7 drives in their opening game against the Dolphins. They were great, and again the value for the 2 was mega. But Kenneth Walker was in a timeshare with Zach Charbonnet, and they couldn't run the football at all. The Seahawks and the Niners were better against the run. I thought they'd be, so that was a bad choice. And Chase and Waddle had very quiet days as their offense barely got to 200 yards. And in fact, the Bengals offense didn't get to 200 yards. So that was a bit of a bad one from me, to be honest with you. We'll move on to this week now. But before I give my picks, I just wanted to remind you that new users can get a free entry if they sign up to Fantasy Gameday with the code FULL10. That's FULL10. And you'll get a free game credit added to your account when you enter your first lineup on the app and deposit the money, of course. And the app is available on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. Here are 5 players that you need to have in your daily fantasy lineup on Fantasy Game Day this Sunday. This week, I'm focusing on the Sunday Stars competition, which covers both the 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. windows here in the UK. And as always, I'll start with my pick for a captain, which is the player in your lineup that gets double points. For me, it has to be Christian McCaffrey this week. Last week, San Francisco weren't going to use him at all, despite him having that calf problem. They ran him 22 times and they targeted him 10 times in the past game as well. And they played New Orleans this week, who allowed 5.4 yards per carry, the 6th most in the league last Sunday. And even with Brock Purdy being out for a toe injury, this offense is going to run through Christian McCaffrey and I think Ricky Pearsall as well. I think those two will be Mac Jones' best friends in the passing game, and I think 6,200 is a great price for him compared to some of the other running backs in the league for a captain. It's cheaper than the likes of Chase Brown and Chuba Hubbard, and it's got 23.2 points last week. One of the best scores of the week against a top Seattle defense. So I love Christian McCaffrey as a captain this week. Okay, on to quarterback. I'm going to go for Justin Fields. I think he is a great option at quarterback this week, costing just 4,600, which is a joint second cheapest quarterback option alongside Joe Flacco. Only Mac Jones is cheaper than Fields this week, and despite him having probably the best performance in his career as a passer against a top defense in the Steelers, even if he isn't anywhere as near as good as a passer he was last week, you've still got the extra element that he has in his playmaking runs. Those alone make him worth a punt at this price, and he's going to be able to defense in Buffalo that really struggled to against a mobile quarterback in Lamar Jackson last week, and has a pretty dodgy secondary as well. I'm saying about the Bills as well, so I think Justin Fields is a great bargain at 4,600. Okay, my third player is going to be a running back in James Conner. Now, here's an interesting one because he is quite expensive at 7,000, and he's involved in a timeshare with Trey Benson. But here they're playing against the Panthers. The Cardinals aren't. They had the worst run defense of all time last year, and they started off terribly with over 200 yards on the ground with Derek Brown coming back against the Jags. And when you're letting Travis Etienne run away over you, I don't think that's a great sign. 6.3 yards per carry they allowed against the Drags, and again, despite Trey Benson getting a decent amount of touches, Conner got 7 more. He's also their go-to back in the passing game, and again, they're going to use him in the red zone as well. So I feel like he is a better pick for running back, even though he is more expensive than than Benson. I just feel like Conner is the best option because I feel like he's going to have a lot of opportunities against a defense that can't really stop the run. I think it could be for a big day after a quiet week 1. I also love a quarterback pass catcher stack, and that's not changing this week because my receiver is going to be Garrett Wilson. I think that's the way to go in daily fantasy is to have a stack because you can sort of almost get 2 points if it goes well, and I'm not changing that approach this week. Last week I went for Daniel Jones and Tyler Warren. This week it's Justin Fields and Garrett Wilson, and it's clear the pair have chemistry. I like their matchup against a dodgy Buffalo secondary, as I said, and I think Wilson is a steal at 5,400. Only Puka Nacua and Zay Flowers had scored more points than him last week for the receiver position. Nacua is significantly more expensive than Wilson is, and he is the Jets' #1 option across their offense as well. So I feel like again for 5,400, Garrett Wilson is worth a punt, especially again with how cheap Justin Fields is. It means you can get a real premier receiver in the other receiver spot as well. Finally, Brenton Strange is someone that I love at tight end, costing just 2,200. I really think tight end is a real interesting one to play with in daily fantasy, and I think the way to go here is either go really premium and go for Trey McBride, or go for Strange and go for a really expensive flex option. And I feel like the £3,000 difference between the two of them makes Strange a viable one this week because he looks to be a real big part of this Jags passing offense, taking over the role that Evan Ingram left in for going to Denver in the offseason. Strange had the 6th highest yards per route run of all tight ends last week. He also led tight ends in EPA too. I think he's a bargain at 2,200. I really do. I feel like he's basically the second option, maybe third option behind Brian Thomas and Travis Hunter, you could say. Yeah, I think he's an absolute steal at 2,200, and he should be in your lineup because I feel like you're going to get quite a few points from Brenton Strange, and I'll be interested to see how his price varies across the season because I feel like it's only going to go up from here for Brenton Strange Right, that wraps up my 5 picks for this week's Daily Fantasy Slate on Fantasy Gameday. Those 5 picks were Christian McCaffrey, Justin Fields, James Conner, Garrett Wilson, and Brenton Strange. Best of luck if you're playing along, and don't forget new users can sign up with the code FULL10 to get that free £7.50 game entry. And just a reminder, please gamble responsibly and only if you're 18 and over and based in the UK and Northern Ireland. All right, let's finish the podcast by predicting all of the Week 2 games against the spread. We'll start with Thursday Night Football, the game that's on in a couple of hours as we speak. So by the time you're probably listening to this game would have happened. But we spoke about it earlier on, Andy. I mean, this is a great game, a game that really could mean so much in the NFC sort of playoff seeding already in Week 2, as the Commanders travel to Lambeau Field to play the Packers. The Packers are favored by 3.5 points. Do you think they'll win by that margin, or do you think the Commanders will come within that spread?
I think they'll win by more than 3. I think if it was in Washington, I'd be a bit more inclined to say a bit more tighter game. But I think you got the home field advantage of Lambeau Field with how good the Packers were a team. Where we talked about it earlier on, with how good the Packers team are, and I think the Commanders. It's hard to know how good they are this year on beating the Giants. I think, they won the game fairly comfortably, but it's the Giants, and I don't know whether they've got the team that can compete with that Packers team in terms of roster strength. So for me, I think Packers win by more than 3. I think for me it's between a 7 and 10 point game. I think with how good Thursday night was last week, with how good Sunday Night Football obviously was last week, and Monday Night Football, I think it could be the first disappointment. And obviously Thursday Night Football has notoriously had these disappointing games that let you down with all the hype, and I think this one might be following a similar trend. I think the Packers will win this game. I think they'll be potentially 10 points up in the fourth quarter, and maybe they'll let in a late touchdown in garbage time. But for me, I think the Packers win this one somewhat comfortably.
I agree with you. I'm going to go for the Packers to cover as well. I think Green Bay probably one of the best teams in the league, and again, their strengths kind of play to Washington's weaknesses a little bit. And again, how much we're going to see on Michael Parsons, we don't know. For a Thursday night game, I'd probably say not much because he's still. I don't think it'll be more than what he played on Sunday. I think it'll be around the 30 snap mark. And then again, 10 days to prepare him. I wouldn't be surprised to see if he starts in week 3. I think that's what it will be. I think. But even say he doesn't start this game, I still think that Green Bay are just so good at scheming up open guys on offense, and the run game was great again. What the Washington defense impressed me a little bit last week, which is why I think it'll be more of a 5-6 point game. I think Jaden Daniels, if he's there in the fourth quarter, will make it close because I just think he's that guy. But I'm going to go for Green Bay just because I feel like they are the better team. It's at home. It's Thursday Night Football. It's a Lambeau Field. It's a night game in Lambeau. They're wearing all white. I think it's just the vibe of it is making me go Green Bay. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Jaden Daniels make this game competitive at least. All right, we're going to the 6 p.m. slate now. We'll start with an all AFC North tie as the Ravens host the Browns. The Ravens are favoured by 11.5 points. Huge spread, the biggest spread of the week. Do you think they could potentially cover that spread?
I think it's less than 11 points. I just feel like if this was not a division game, I'd be saying absolutely maybe even more than 11. I think it's one of the best teams in the AFC in the NFL against one of the worst teams in the NFL in my opinion. But I think these AFC North games, I think more than any of the division, just throw up these crazy tight games. I mean, the Browns. Myles Garrett caused problems for Joe Burrow on the weekend. 2 sacks, 5 tackles. Only one player got more sacks than Garrett in week 1. So for me, that's where they could win the game. It's through that. I don't think the offense is going to win the game. But Joe Flacco, on his day, he's the definition of solid. And I think when you're that kind of quarterback who's just solid, you're not the worst quarterback, you're not the best quarterback. You can win these one-off games. And I think in a division rivalry, I think the Cleveland will cause a shock and run them close. But I think, even having said that, I think we'll still see Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Dave Flowers run riot on this team, and even just defense alone, I think that could be where they win the game as well. But I think I'm looking more like a 9-pointer more than an 11-pointer, so maybe just below the 11-point mark. But I still think the Ravens win, but I don't think it'll be quite as much as maybe the people upstairs in the betting companies feel.
I agree with you. I think the Ravens probably win, but not by this margin. So I'm going to go Cleveland here. I think it'll be close. I mean, let's not forget the Browns did beat the Ravens last year with Jameis Winston. So, I mean, admittedly it's Jameis Winston, not Joe Flacco, but they played really well in this game last year. And again, AFC North game, anything can happen. They're normally quite close. I think it's going to be quite close as well. I think the Ravens will win, but I'm going to Cleveland to come within those 11.5 points as well. All right, we'll stick in the AFC North with go over to the Bengals. They host the Jags. The Bengals are 3.5-point favourites here. Which way are you going here?
I think the Jags win. I think the Bengals, if this was a Week 15 game, I'd be saying Bengals all day long. But I think the Bengals, notoriously in the Zach Taylor, they struggle in these early games. I think they got very fortunate Week 1. I actually had the Browns beat the Bengals in Week 1 in my podcast, and I was so close to getting it right.
They should have done.
If Austin Smith had messed entirely, it might have been a whole different story. But I think, Bengals for me don't start notoriously well. I think there's problems there. I think the defense, though, Shamir Stewart had his moments, Trey Hendrickson, but I think this Jags team was just that impressive. I think against the Bengals team, who I don't think were particularly great in Week 1, I'm going to go for the Jags to win. Now I think it will be a tight game. I can see it being one of those games where I remember we watched a game in London together in the bar where the Bengals just had this crazy game where it was back and forth, mixed field goals. And I think it'd be one of those games where Bengals almost lose it themselves, maybe more than the Jags beat them. I think I can see maybe a McPherson missed field goal, maybe a.
Well, it's like the Patriots game the Bengals had in Week 1 last year. They lost that themselves, really.
Yeah,
for being honest.
Been like that a lot of times in that early few weeks, and then they often leave it too late then to. Last year, if they started the season off, if they won that game, they'd have made the playoffs, potentially. So, Bengals for me will be one of the teams to look out for this year. I think early on in the season, even though it's at home, I think the Jags take this.
Do you know what? I'm going the other way. I'm going to pick the Bengals to go 2-0 for the first time since having Zach Taylor as a head coach. Never done that with him as a head coach. I'm going to go for them to go 2-0 to start the year. Again, I don't think it'll be pretty. It wasn't pretty against the Browns either. Jamar Chase hardly got involved. I thought the Jags defense is worse than the Bengals defense. The Browns defense, sorry. I think it can be got at. I do like pieces on the Jags defense, but I think it can be got at. And we'll see. Apparently, Travis Hunter's playing more snaps on defense. I mean, I like Travis Hunter, but I'd like to see how he fares covering Jamar Chase or T Higgins. I feel like that's an interesting, that is a breath of fire. Welcome to the NFL. Obviously, you only played a couple of snaps on defense last week. Now you're playing up against Jamar Chase and T Higgins. I feel that could be really interesting to watch in this game. They said he's going to play more on defense this week, so we'll see what happens there. But I'm going for the Bengals. I think the Jags didn't really impress me much this week. Even being honest, I think the Panthers are just really bad, and to be honest with you, but we'll see. And I'm going to go for the Bengals. All right, no division game here. The Cowboys host the Giants. This game was on Sky Sports Plus as well. If you wanted to watch it, if you've got Sky, obviously all games are on DAZN that aren't in the Sky main games of the week. And the Cowboys are 6.5-point favourites against the Giants, meaning that the bookies think that they could win by a touchdown. Do you think the Cowboys can win by that margin?
I think they can win by 2 touchdowns. I think, if I looked at this game before the season started, I'd be a bit more like, the Giants could cause a problem. It could be a 3-point game. But from what I saw from both teams Week 1, one team playing against a team that made the NFC, one team playing a team that won the whole Super Bowl, and the Cowboys, to me, as I said earlier, were really impressive. And I think they'll get this game won. I can see it being a 14, maybe 17-point win. Maybe something like 27-10, around that kind of mark. Maybe 24-10 or something like that. For me, one of the easier ones to call this week. I'm going for the Cowboys.
I agree with you. I'm not impressed by the Giants whatsoever, so I completely agree with you. Okay, we'll go on to the main game on Sky. It's on Sky NFL, and then after the Manchester Derby, it's also on Sky Main Event. It's the Lions hosting the Bears. The Lions are favored by 5.5 points here. You mentioned this one could be close in earlier on in the podcast. What are you feeling here?
Or the Ben Johnson Bowl, he's going to get
Oh.
this. Talk about him getting booed, and I think that's going to happen with how sort of that all unfolded. Yeah, I think the Lions win, but I think the Lions win by 3. I don't think it's as much as what the bookmakers are saying. I think the Bears defense for the majority of the game on Monday Night Football was impressive with Dennis Allen there, but I think against the Lions, for me, I have my concerns, but I think it's one thing playing against Bears. There's one thing playing against this Packers team with Mike Parsons there. So I think Bears are going to cause some problems. I think there'll be definitely some teething problems early on in the season. Probably have to get used to a new coordinator, well, 2 new coordinators. But I think it's at home as well. Fans are going to be loud. For me, I think the Lions win by 3. Now, whether that's a field goal wins or whether they go 10 or 7 points up and the Bears get a late touchdown, make it close and make it a 3-point game. I don't know, but yeah, I just think that sadly after week 1, I think the Bears are the Bears, unfortunately. So yeah, give me the Lions by 3.
Yeah, I think the Lions will win, but again, I'm gonna go with you. I'm gonna say that Chicago will come within the 5.5 points. I think it'll be closer. I thought this is be a very tactical game between Ben Johnson and Calvin Shepherd calling the defense. I felt it, obviously because all these coordinators. Well, Dennis Allen doesn't know he does actually because he knows the players that he knows the staff that came from New Orleans to Detroit with Dan Campbell. So all these guys know each other so well. I feel like this is going to be a really tactical game. I think the Lions will win, but again, I'm not confident that they're going to win by more than 6 points. So I'm gonna go with you here. Okay, I'll go on to the next game. This game's on Channel 5. The Dolphins host the Patriots. Surprisingly, the Dolphins are 1.5 point favourites in this game, which did surprise me, judging by the public perception on New England compared to the Dolphins. This game is because it's 1.5 points. This game's basically a pick 'em. Who are you picking this week?
The Dolphins. It's only really one. I had really only one real reason why I picked the Dolphins. A bit of a sort of a kind of weird thing, but I think that both teams have poor secondaries. But I prefer our run game. I think our receivers are just as good. I think the defensive line is just as good. But I think the one thing I'm going to go for, Tua has never lost against the Patriots. Just. I think if it was in New England, I'd be a bit more like, oh god. But I think in Miami, I just feel like, don't get wrong, our fan base isn't at all the most fearsome. I think that is atmosphere-wise, there's so much more fearsome for quarterbacks to go to than Hard Rock. I think, I'd much rather play in Hard Rock as a quarterback than Lambeau, Philly, Buffalo, that kind of thing. But even so, I just feel like both teams are going to be eager to make amends week 1, but I think one team, despite his flaws, have a coach they know his playbook for the last few years, whereas one team still getting used to a new playbook, a new system. So yeah, going to give me the Dolphins, and I think it will be maybe listen like a 27-26 or like a 20-19 or something like that. I think it's going to be a good game, going to be a tight game, but I think Dolphins to me will edge it.
I'm going the other way. I think it's going to be an ugly game. I think it's going to be a really ugly game. And in an ugly game, who am I going to trust to win that in terms of coaching? And I'm going to trust Mike Vrabel. I really am. Vrabel had a really good record against the AFC East. He's played really well against Buffalo. His Tennessee teams killed the Dolphins. And some of the players on this Patriots defense I thought could do similar. I don't know their individual talent, but I just feel like the way that Vrabel's going to have them play against this team and the way they're going to press Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and really get to my I just can't see us going well for Miami at all. So I pick the Patriots. Patriots here. I just think, judging by how variable Tennessee teams played, Miami, and especially that game against McDaniel where they bottled it towards the end, which ruined their season. I just I'm going for New England here. I think, and I think if he does lose that game, we might see the end of Mike McDaniel as well. All right, the first away underdog of the week are the Niners. Sorry, favorite of the week are the Niners. They go to New Orleans without Brock Purdy, by the sounds of things, but are still the favourites in this game regardless. Going to have Matt Jones starting. We're finally going to get Matt Jones and the Niners after all the noise that they were gonna draft him in 2021. Obviously, ended up trading up for Trey Lance instead. But yeah, no, we're finally going to see Matt Jones and the Niners playing against the Saints. The Niners are favored by 4.5 points. I'm going to go for the Niners. I think they're still going to win this by quite a hefty margin, just because Christian McCaffrey had a really good game last week, even without. Even when we thought he was injured, he still touched the ball 30 times, played really well, one of the highest scorers in fantasy last week. And the Saints can't stop the run, if we're being honest. So I feel like that's a big mismatch. And again, I think Matt Jones can do a stable job in a dome. It's not really hard to play in a dome. So yeah, I think even without Purdy, the Niners will win by quite a margin. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I totally agree. This was probably my easiest one to predict before the Purdy injury got announced, or the sort of him being ruled out for the game got revealed. But I think exactly still with Mac Jones, who I think if he'd gone to the Niners, if he had gone there, I think he'd have had a better career. I think it's all been in the right place at the wrong time in New England, and I think that I don't think he's going to be a starter anywhere now. But I think in a one-off game against a team that is bad in the Saints, I think they were my pick pre-season to have the number 1 overall pick next year. I don't have any faith in them. They got a mixture of backups and not very good guys and veterans who are past it. So for me, the Saints, I don't think I'll pick them for any game this year unless one team comes out has a massive injury bug, or maybe they're playing the Titans. I just feel like for me, this is one of the easiest ones to pick. Even with their star quarterback being out, give me the Niners, and I think it'll be a fairly convincing win for them.
In the NFC South preview, I think I said the only game I can see the Saints being favourite in is when they play the Giants in New Orleans, and that's it. That's probably the only one realistically. All right, okay, we'll go to the NFC. So the AFC East now. The Jets host the Bills. The Bills are 7.5 point favourites going into MetLife Stadium. The biggest away favourite of the week. Do you think this will be a close one, or do you think Buffalo will win by a score?
Yeah, I think by a score. I think the Jets were impressive on offense. Like Justin Fields, the RPO plays. Breece Hall had a sort of bounce-back game. Garrett Wilson was Garrett Wilson. But the defense was really concerning for me to allow 30-odd points. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong, I was really impressed with Aaron Rodgers' performance. But I was not impressed by the Jets' defense. A team that has notoriously had a good defense under Salah over the years, I thought it was a really poor defensive performance from them. And I just feel like, if you're letting in 30-odd points against, the Steelers team who are a bunch of, veterans playing for one last year, one last ride, it's one thing playing against Buffalo Bills and, Josh Allen. The performance he put in week one was that fourth quarter comeback. We talked about JJ McCarthy's comeback. This was another one where it was like, wow, that's a really impressive comeback. And for me, I think personally, if it was in Buffalo, it would be even more of a lock for me. I think I don't see them losing any games this year in Buffalo in their final year at the stadium. I think they're getting the number 1 seed in the AFC purely for that reason alone. I think Bills to me, they have lost in the Jets over the years. They lost in the game when Aaron Rodgers went down. But I think this Bills team is just way too strong. I think they're just Jets. I was really impressed with, but I think they're entirely different places in their development. One team's trying to get back into the playoffs for the first time since 2010. And one team's trying to win their first Super Bowl. So for me, Bills, pretty easy one to predict for me.
I'm going for the Jets here, but maybe not to win, but to come within the 7.5 points. I think it'll be a close game. I really do. Look at what the Bills' defense did against the Ravens offense, well, look at what the Jets have on offense. They have the rushing quarterback. They had a really good run game last week. They had a really good offensive line last week. Buffalo couldn't. They literally the worst team in the league against. They couldn't stop Derrick Henry. I'm not saying that Brees Hall and Braden Allen are Derrick Henry, but like that secondary is a worry, and the Bills again against the run is a worry. So I don't know if they're going to lose a game, but I certainly think the Jets are going to make this a close one. So I'm going to go for the Jets. I think that's I think again for fantasy, I think I said it in my segment, my fantasy game day segment. I'm picking Justin Fields and Garrett Wilson this week to have a day. I feel like just against the Bills defense, there are points there because their back end's really not good. It's really not, and we saw that the other night. And they're not Ravens, but I do feel like the Jets are going to make this a game. Okay, Pittsburgh. They host the Seahawks. The Steelers are 3.5 point favourites in this game. Do you think that's a doable win for the Steelers?
I think if they're going to win, that's how they'll win. But I think the Seahawks win this game. Despite how it ended for them, I think there are times where you look. I don't know whether this is down to 49ers O-line issue, whether it's down to the defense the Seahawks had, but Purdy was barely given any time to throw that ball, and I think this team, I think obviously led by a British man in Aiden Did and the DC. I think we should all be rooting for the Seahawks defense this season. But for me, I just feel like it's probably one of the ones I'm least confident in pick wise. I think that or the Dolphins winning. I think for me, this is one of the. I think this might be for me the hardest one to predict. Certainly, if not one of them. And for me, I think how we saw Brees Hall get to the run defense in Pittsburgh, how we saw Justin Fields as well, and Braden Allen. You think who they're playing in Seattle with Zach Charbonnet, and I think Sam Darnold at times looked really composed in the pocket, almost a bit like the Vikings. Not the same levels as the Vikings, but I think we saw a much more complete version of Darnold than maybe we saw in Carolina or New York. So, yeah, give me the Seahawks to win. I think it is by 3. I don't think I see Seahawks winning by much more than that. But equally, it's one of the ones where I think I wouldn't be shocked if I was wrong in terms of my pick.
Yeah, I'm going for the Steelers here. Sam Darnold wasn't good last week. If in terms of numbers, not good in terms of advanced metrics. It just didn't impress me. And the Steelers have seen this Seahawks defense is really good, doing it really good. I really like it. And we've sort of talked a lot about it on the podcast over the last couple of weeks. But one of the offenses that has seen this Mike McDonald defense the most is this Pittsburgh Steelers team. Obviously, seen it in Baltimore before he became head coach of the Seahawks. And I really do feel like I think it's be a close one. I'm going for the better quarterback, and Aaron Rodgers is a better quarterback than Sam Darnold. So that's what I'm going for there. And then the final game of the 6 p.m. slate sees the Rams go to Tennessee. The Rams are 5.5 point favourites on the road. How are you feeling about this one?
Me, the easiest one to predict. Rams win this. I think they win this by double digits. I think Cam Ward showed in spells. And there was that one play he made early on where he threw that sort of emergency screen pass to one of his offensive weapons, but who's he got to throw to? It's the same thing as Bryce Young. It's a terrible offensive help. Pollard obviously is a good option to have to hand the ball off to sort of help Cam Ward better to being an NFL starter. But for me, there's not anything really on this team on both sides of the ball that makes you think they're going to beat this Rams team. Matt Stafford, wasn't.
He's really good last week. Really good. But when he's injured, really good last week.
Yeah, I think for guys that come back from injury, they only got 14 points granted. But I think against this team, I think we're going to see, especially the defense, Kobe Turner, Byron Young, Braden Frisk, Jared Verse. They're going to cause some problems for this Titans O-line. Cam Ward,
as the Broncos did.
Kieran Williams.
But the Broncos had the most sacks in the league last season. They had the most sacks in the league last week. The Broncos had an amazing defensive performance, and I think the Rams are really good on defense too. And I really like what I saw from Cam Ward again. He was aggressive. He was quite composed, even though he had all this pressure, and that's what he was coming into the league. I think he's having a good career. But really, really tough couple of defenses to play in your first 2 games in the NFL. So I'm going to go for the Rams to cover the 5.5 point spread here. All right, we'll go on to the 9 p.m. slate now. 3 games, all on Sky Sports. We'll start with the game in Arizona. The Cardinals host the Panthers. The Cardinals are 6.5 point favourites at home. Battle of the 2 short quarterbacks, Kyler Murray and Bryce Young here as well. If you like a short quarterback. The Cardinals are favored by a touchdown. Do you think they'll win by a touchdown?
Yeah. I think this is me is such a terrible game, and this is not an appealing game at all for anyone. But I think this Cardinals team will win this game. I think I can see it being that 7-10 point mark. I think the Cardinals weren't imperious, but they were fine. And I think against the Panthers team, who were really bad in that first game, I think they'll have a comfortable victory. I mean, what a good start for them. Saints, then Panthers in the first 2 weeks. That's such a favourable start for the Cardinals. And I think the Cardinals win this fairly convincingly.
Me too. I think their defense is going to have a really good game here after an indifferent game against the Saints. I feel like they're going to have a really, really good game here. Denver, their defense had a great game last week. They travelled to Indianapolis. The Broncos are 2.5 point favourites going into Indianapolis. Do you think they can get the job done on the road here?
Yeah, I do. I mean, Colts, I don't think we saw a real effect of the Colts because of how bad the Dolphins were. I think against this defense that the Broncos have, I think there's not. The Colts could shock me. You never know, because it wasn't like a convincing win for the Broncos. But I think that was more because of the offense and the defense. I mean, Bo Nix threw some picks. I don't think I was massively impressed by the Broncos' offense, but the defense alone, I think will beat this Colts team. I think we'll probably see Daniel Jones go back down to earth. Now, we were saying about Sam Darnold all of last season, and it ended up being until about week 17 an MVP contender. So I could be proved wrong, and Daniel Jones could ball out again. Maybe it's the New York effect, but for me, Denver's defense is just way too strong. It's one of the best in the league, and I think they'll win this game. And I think it'll be I'm looking at a scoreline of maybe something like 24-17. Maybe a 17-10, 17-7, or something like that. I'm just really high on the Broncos at the moment, and I think they'll win this game with some ease.
Yeah, that defense wins games on its own, and I think Bo Nix, no need to panic with the way he played last week. I think the Titans' defense is actually quite good as well. I don't think the Colts' defense is as good as that Titans' defense, and I feel like they'll have a bounce back game. So I'm gonna go for the Broncos to win by quite a big margin there as well. And that leads us on to the Super Bowl 59 rematch. The Philadelphia Eagles going to Arrowhead to play the Kansas City Chiefs. The Eagles are 1.5 point favourites going into Arrowhead, which is interesting. Interesting. Not many teams going to Arrowhead and are the favourites. How are you feeling about this game?
I think the Eagles win by more than that. I think they win by 7 or 10. Now, if they were to meet obviously they can't. They're in different conferences. But if they were to meet in the playoffs at Arrowhead, I would be sitting here and saying Chiefs win, because I think the Chiefs late on in the season or in the playoffs are like a different beast to what they are in the opening weeks. And I just think that right now they're going through some problems. I have a suspicion they're going to go out and get Tyreek Hill. I've got a feeling that Mahomes is going to get him back for this season alone, just to try and give Kelsey one last run. But I think week 2, with players out injured, with the team struggling a bit at the moment, and the Eagles, they weren't at their best in week 1, but they got the job done. But they got Carter back for the game, unless he decides to bet on someone else this week. So I think we'll see the Eagles back to their best with Carter now back in the defense. And I just feel like, even though it's at Arrowhead, it's their first game at Arrowhead, first game in the States this season. I just feel like right now, how the two teams are in week 2, I just feel like the Eagles are just a bit ahead of the Chiefs in terms of roster strength. And I think, in years gone by, Mahomes has sort of relied on a poor division, winning them games, and they won 15 games last year, but they weren't at their best. I think in a harder division, and they're going to find it hard to win these games. And I feel like, they could well start the season 0-2.
I agree with you. I'm going to go for Philadelphia here as well. I just, with the way the Chiefs' defense looked more than their offense, the way the Chiefs' defense looked against the Chargers just doesn't give me much confidence whatsoever going up against that Eagles offense. So yeah, give me Philadelphia here. Sunday Night Football. That's Minnesota hosting the Falcons. The Vikings are favored by 4.5 in their own building. We get JJ McCarthy playing against Michael Penix. A nice game for two quarterbacks you really haven't seen much of. Obviously, Penix only played 3 games to finish the end of last year, and McCarthy played his first game last week. So this should be an exciting one. The Vikings are favored by 4.5 points. I'll go first. I think the Vikings, again, I said they're the best coach team in the NFL. I think they're going to win this game. I like the Falcons. I like what they saw last week. I thought they're probably unlucky to win last week. But Minnesota it's in Minnesota. I thought they just have the whole package. And if McCarthy can play to a decent level, then they're going to win. They're going to win most games, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I have to thank my guest on my show this week, American TJ. He said that it's actually a repeat of the national championship game in terms of the quarterbacks of Michael Penix and JJ McCarthy. I've also gone for the Vikings. I think I see it being a 7-point game. I think the Falcons they are the hardest team, them and the Chargers, to bet on each week because they're so predictable. The whole NFC South is just at times so predictable. Maybe not this season, but I think Vikings, to me, I've waxed lyrical about them before, about how good they are. I just think that just at defense alone, I mean, the blitz package Flores offers, I think it's going to cause problems. I think whilst we saw a more conservative approach in the first half, I think they may start this game off straight away, going for the blitz, going for Penix, going for a young quarterback. Well, I say young, he's actually one of the older.
McCarthy's the youngest quarterback in the NFL, and Penix is not near the youngest, despite having only played 4 games as a starter, which is quite funny.
Yeah,
but,
I couldn't believe there was one stat. It was like I can't think there was these 2 quarterbacks they compared where one quarterback was in their 3rd year, one was in their 5th year, and
Anthony Richardson. He's older than Anthony Richardson. That's one thing I do know. And obviously, he was drafted a couple of years ago, but he's older than a few quarterbacks. But yeah, Anthony Richardson was one of them, which is crazy. Same with Bo Nix as well. He's an older quarterback as well. But yeah, I think Atlanta will be good. I thought they were unlucky to use last week, but yeah, Minnesota just too good. Monday Night Football, 2 games. We're going back to the double header, back to back, rather than like one starting an hour later. We're going 2 games back to back now. With the Texans hosting the Bucks in the first one, which starts at midnight, which is a nice time for a prime time compared to 1 a.m. It means you can probably stay up and watch an extra hour or so. Then, if you wanted to, the Texans host the Bucks. The Texans are favored by 2.5 points. How are you feeling about this game? Because we didn't really see much from an offense, but the Rams' defense is really good in the same aspect, wasn't it?
Yeah, one thing I will say, I'm so glad they changed the timings of these games because I don't know who commissioned having 2 games on at the same time. Particularly in the UK, for me, I tend to watch my late games the next day on the way to work on Game Pass. Yeah. But that was really hard. I had to sort of try and pick games. I didn't realise until you just said it. I just assumed they were on at the same time until you said it. So I'm glad that's the case. But yeah, I think the Texans win, and it's purely home advantage. I think it's such a tight game. I think both teams are very similar in terms of where they are at teams. Winning easy divisions, have the quarterbacks there. Have weapons. They're very similar teams. I always say in years gone by that the Cowboys and the Dolphins are like the AFC, NFC equivalents. Both beat bad teams, can't beat good teams, can't win big games. And for me, Buccaneers and Texans are very similar in terms of being where they are in terms of teams. So I think this is a really hard game to predict. And for me, I'm just going purely for home advantage. It's probably a bit of a lazy answer, but for me, I just can't pick. They're both very similar teams. And I think for me, just purely for the fact that Houston Texans are at home, I'll go for the Texans.
I'd go for the Bucks. I love this Texans defense. I think it's one of the best in the NFL. But the Bucks have so much firepower that they might not get Chris Godwin back. He is trending in the right direction, but he's probably not going to play this game. But no, Amika Buka, Mike Evans, Sterling Shepard. He's had sort of resurgence, playing with his college teammate and Baker Mayfield as well. Like, this is a good, and they've got so much firepower. And the Texans, they have the defense, they have the quarterback. I don't think they have much firepower. And if the Bucs can lock down Nico Collins, I just feel like they're gonna win this game. So I'm gonna go for the Bucs, but I think it's been really close. And honestly, this is one of the hardest to pick in the league this week, certainly, because it's just because they're quite similar. It's just really just a pick 'em there. And then the 3 a.m. game in the UK, the Chargers go to Vegas to play the Raiders. It's obviously the Raiders' home opener. Apparently, over 80% of the fans are going to be Raiders fans in this game, which obviously you don't. Which is quite an interesting one. So it's going to be a very, very hostile atmosphere for the Chargers. The Chargers are 3.5 point favourites on the road. Do you think? I think that's quite generous of how the Raiders played last week.
Yeah, I do feel like if it was in so far, even though again it's not that much of a home advantage for them because it tends to be more of a home game for the away team than the home team, but I think what you mentioned then about the hostile atmosphere is going to be Justin Herbert in this team. And Justin Herbert, he's won one game in a big moment. Can he do it 2 weeks in a row? That's not been shown yet as a player. But I think the Chargers still win. I do think it is by... I don't see it being close. I think we're looking at maybe a 7 to 10 point game again.
Ooh, okay.
I just feel like the Raiders are a hard team to call because Ashton Gentry got a touchdown. I don't think he got the best yardage, in this sort of rookie debut. But then Geno Smith, Brock Bowers, it was a great.
And you look who Geno Smith was thrown to as well, like Dante Thornton, this 6'5" guy who looks like Peter Crouch. He's really, really slight, but he's 6'5". But he's really fast at 6'5", and he was a bit of a matchup problem as well. And Jacoby Myers, hopefully they can agree a contract with Jacoby Myers. I think he's a really underrated player. But obviously Amari Cooper's retired. Like they don't really have much. It's not like he has the receiving core he had in Seattle. Obviously Brock Bowers is great, but luckily he is healthy after getting injured. It was a bit of a scare, but he should be fine to play in this game. But no, you look at what he's. I think, Gino did a great job. I agree with you there. I'm going to go for the Raiders. I think in a pick 'em, really. Well, look, in this way, I can't pick. It's not really a pick 'em, but I can't pick between these two teams in Vegas, and Vegas are the home underdogs. So that just makes me more inclined to pick the Raiders. I think this will be a close game. It's a division game after all. I can't see them. I can't see them losing by more than a field goal. So when it's 3.5, 4 points, I can't see it being 4 points. So give me the Raiders to at least come win those 3 points, and then we'll see what happens there. But I think this will be a spicy game at 3 a.m. I won't watch it at 3 a.m. But no, I think it'll be a good one to watch it on Tuesday morning. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode. Season's already rolling. Week 2 is packed with loads of much-watch games as we've gone through them all. Many of us are on UK TV to watch them all. They're great to see them all. I think there's 8 or 9 games on TV, and there's some more on BBC Sounds and TalkSport as well. So great coverage here, which is brilliant. Big thank you to you, Andy, for joining me today. It's been great to have you on a podcast again. Can you let the listeners know where they can check out all your work?
Absolutely. So you can see on the visual, my Twitter account is Andy Davies Sport. That's where you can find all of my content in one place. I repost my TikTok, my articles I write, the YouTube blogs I do, everything else, podcasts I release. And the podcast itself is across_the_pod. That's the case on all socials, whether it's X or Instagram. My personal account on Instagram is Andy R. Davis, and my TikTok is Andy Talks NFL. I'm on the road to 10,000 followers. I'm trying to get that by the end of the year. So if you want to give me a follow, do give me a follow, because I'm hoping I'll find out next week whether I get the creds for the London games and the Dublin game and Wembley as well. So if you want to keep an eye out for that content, then do by all means give me a follow and give the podcast a follow. Give my Twitter page a follow, wherever you fancy. Click that button.
Awesome. Thank you very much, mate. That's it for the podcast this week. I'll be back early next week to recap the biggest moments of week 2 and look ahead to week 3, which has got a really interesting Thursday night game as well. But until then, enjoy your Sunday, and I'll see you next time on the Full 10 Yards NFL podcast. Goodbye.